Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we are going to discuss about river training and why it is important and different parameters which are used for the river training. So let's start with the introduction and basic introduction about why do we need the river training. Rivers are especially alluvial. If we say alluvial rivers are dynamic, they constantly shift their course due to erosion, sedimentation, and meandering. When rivers are left uncontrolled, they can damage lives, agriculture, infrastructure, and disrupt water supply systems. Thus, river training is a set of engineered interventions to control and guide the river's behavior for safety and utility. Now, how to define the river training? River training is the systematic planning, design, and construction of the structures and modifications to regulate the direction, velocity, and behavior of a river to meet desired objectives. Objectives like protection from floods, protection of bank erosion, maintaining a fixed water course, safe navigation, and efficient irrigation and power generation. In previous lecture, we have discussed about the classification of the rivers. Here is a slight revision of the classification of rivers based on the characteristics. The first is the alluvial river. The alluvial rivers flow through soft materials like sand, silt, and clay, common in plains like Indus and Ganga. Constantly changes course, requires frequent training. Okay, next is the Meandering River. These rivers follows winding paths in flat areas, forms loops or curves which are known as meanders, erodes at outer banks and deposits on inner banks. Then comes the Braided River. Braided River splits into many interlacing channels caused by excessive sediment load, unstable training required for the navigations or intakes. Then comes the fleshy and torrential rivers. These are found in hilly areas, sudden floods, and fast flows. These carries debris, rocks, training focus on the energy dissipation. Now, what are the objectives of river training? The first objective is to flood protection. It helps to prevent water from spilling into nearby homes and farms. These are achieved by using construction of the embankments, leaves, or cutoffs. Next objective of the river training is the erosion control. It stops river from cutting its banks and destroying land. It is done it is done by using revetments, spurs, and pitching. Third objective is of the river improvement is navigation improvement. Navigation improvement keeps channel deep and wide for boats, and the methods used for that is rigging, training walls, and spurs. The fourth object of the river training is stabilizing river course. It keeps river in a fixed path, avoids meandering, and it helps in designing bridges, barrages. The uses for such river for the stabilizing river course, the method used are guide buns and cutoffs. The fifth objective of the river training is water diversion. It guides water into canals or turbines, and it is done by using the guide buns, head regulators, and spurs. Now, there are some terminologies which will be used while explaining the different types of the methods for the river training, and the first term is the meander. A meander is basically a curved path or loop formed naturally by a river in a flat areas. Okay. Next is the aggradation. Aggradation is basically deposition of a sediment in river bedded and raising its level. Degradation. It's basically the erosion and lowering of the riverbed. Score. Localized deepening near piers or spurs due to strong water flow. Leave. It spells its spelling is Leave, leave, which is defined as raised embankment near the bank to prevent flooding. Next is the embankment. Embankment is the earth wall parallel to the river to protect surrounding land. Another term is the guide band or bank. It is the engineered embankment to guide river flow or from structures like bridges and barrages. Next is the spore or groin. Small wall protecting into river to alter flow direction and reduce erosion. Now, what is the training wall? Training wall are the continuous structures along river course to keep water in desired path. Pitching. Pitching is basically the stone or concrete placed on slopes to prevent erosions. Stone or concrete placed on slopes to prevent erosion. That's what it's about. We are talking about pitching. Next is the launching apron. Now, launching apron is a stone layer at riverbed near structures, sinks, and edges during the score to protect the toe. Now, there are different methods of river training, and we will be discussing those in a in a detail. The first type of the method of river training is guide band, or we also called as guide bank. It is defined as an engineered earth embankment built on both sides of a river near barrages, weirs, or bridges to guide river flow safely and prevent lateral attack. The key features of guide band or guide bank are stone pitching on slopes, launching apron at toe, and curved or straight shape. What is the purpose of this method? The purposes of this method are direct flow towards the structure and to prevent outflanking during floods. These are used such as practically it is seen at the in Pakistan it's Sakhar Beraj and Guddu Beraj. There are three types of guide band or guide bank. Number one is the parallel. These are used where river is straight. Number two is converging. These narrows the flow and increases the velocity. Third is the diverging, which spreads the flow and reduces the velocity. Okay, so this was about the guide band and guide bank. The next method of the river training is spurs or groins. Now, the definition of this spurs is the structures extending from the bank into rivers to deflect, attract, or control river flow and protect banks. There are different materials while constructing this structure, such as earth, stone, bamboo, brushwood for permeable spurs. There are different types of spurs and functions. The first type is the attracting spur, and the function of that is that it guides flow towards it, used to direct water into canal head. Next type of the spur is the repelling spur, which pushes flow away from eroding bend, used for protection. Third type is the deflecting spur. Deflecting spur is slightly alters flow used to adjust river alignment. And next type of the spur is impermeable spur. The permeable spur allows partial flow, reduces velocity and sediment transport. Last, impermeable spur. Impermeable spurs are completely blocks flow, means which completely blocks the flow, and these are stronger control but more scoring. Okay, so these were some of the types of the spur. In the end, I will discuss about the difference between the spur and groin, because in some because I have seen in some question paper that people even ask about the spur and groin difference, whereas there is a very these are both same thing, but still they make us confused about these two terms. So I'll make this easier for you to differentiate and to know that what are the possible differences, because in my perspective spurs and groins are the same structures, but if someone is uh, trying to be over smart and asking you a question to differentiate between spurs and groans, then I'll share you some possible differences between that. That might be the possible differences. Otherwise, these both terms, even in the books, are considered to be the same structures. Okay, I'll discuss that in the end. So let's talk about the third type of the river training method, that is the embankments and the flood leaves. Okay, now, the definition of that is that these are the raised earth structures parallel to river banks to confine flood water and protect farmland and villages. The structure is made up of earth fill with a trapezoidal shape and slope protection with turfing or stone pitching. What is the advantage of constructing the embankments and flood leaves are inexpensive compared to walls, immediate flow protection. And what are the disadvantages? These have high water level inside river and breach can cause massive damage. The fourth type of the river training method is pitching and revetment. Okay, so pitching is basically protection layer of stone or concrete on slopes of bunds or banks to protect from wave action and erosion. Whereas revetment is stone or concrete wall like protection against fast flowing water, often combined with filters to drain seepage. Okay, so this was the difference between pitching and revetment. The fifth type of the river training method is the launching apron. It is defined as a stone layer placed at a toe bottom of the embankments or spurs. It sinks into the skir's hole during high flow and forms a flexible protection bed. The purpose of launching apron is to prevent undermining of structures and to adjust automatically to changing riverbed. The sixth type of the river training method is cutoffs. The cutoffs are the artificial channels constructed across Mander's Loop to shorten river course. The purpose of cutoffs are to control meandering, increase flow velocity, and reduce sedimentation. The application of cutoff are used where river meanders threatens structures or delay water flow. The seventh type of the river training is the dredging. Dredging is the mechanical removal of silt, clay, and sediment from beds to increase depth and maintain navigable waterway. These are used for navigation, removing blockages near intake points, but there are some limitations that digging is a temporary solution and it is a expensive method. Eighth type of the river training method is the training walls. The training walls are continuous masonry or concrete structures to build force the river to stay into a fixed channel or to separate flows. These are used in narrow rocky valleys, hill torrents, and urban areas with limited space. The advantages of training walls are precise control and long life, and the disadvantages are high cost and require deep foundation. There are some design considerations which are taken into account, okay, and those factors which are considered while designing such structures are hydrology, hydraulics, sediment transport, bank soil types, location of structure. Hydrology. Hydrology explains peak discharge, flood frequency, and rainfall data. Hydraulics factors explains flow velocity, depth, and cross section. Sediment transportation factor explains particle size, particle size and deposition tendency. Okay, whereas the bank soil type factor explains cohesive versus non-cohesive soil erosion resistance. Okay, the last factor is the location of the structures. This factor explains bridges, barrages, canals nearby. Okay, nearby structures. Okay, the real examples from Pakistan uh, on the rivers, which for protecting the structures and what type of the river training methods are used. On the Indus River, Sakhar Barrage is the structure, and river training method used is the guide buns or spurs and spurs. Okay. On Chenab River, the structure constructed is Trimu headworks and training method is guide banks and pitching. On Ravi River, Shahdara Bridge is the structure which is constructed and river training method used there is the spurs and rigging. On Kabul River, Versak Tame structure is constructed and training method used is training walls and revetments. There are different advantages and disadvantages of different types of the river training methods. Like guide buns are having the advantages like long term protection essential for barrages, okay, but there are disadvantages that these are high cost and rigid. Next method is spurs. What this advantage of spur is that these are flexible and economical, whereas disadvantages of spurs are local fact scoring if misaligned. Okay. Embankments. For embankment, the advantage is the quick flood protection, whereas disadvantage is the rise of breach. For pitching, the advantage is it prevents erosion, whereas disadvantage is that it does not guide river. Cutoffs. Cutoffs advantage is that it controls meandering, but its disadvantage is that it's costly land use. Dredging advantages is that it is an immediate depth recovery, but the disadvantage is that it is expensive and lived. The last is the training walls. Training walls The advantage of the training wall is that there is a strong control, whereas the disadvantages of the training walls are these are rigid and costly. The conclusion of the lecture is that river training is essential for managing rivers safely and sustainably. No single method works everywhere. Sometimes a combination based on the river behavior, soil, and purpose gives the best results. So, the possible difference between the spurs versus the groins are is a term used in South Asia like Pakistan and India and commonly used in river training, usually smaller and built to control river flow and erosion. It is made of earth, stone, and bamboo. Okay, whereas groins is the term used in western countries, used in both rivers and coastal protection, can be longer, often used to prevent coastal erosion. These are made of wood, stone, and concrete. So this was about the river training methods. Thank you for listening.